So this is the 5 a.m. GMT on Wednesday, the 11th of November 2020, the day after the 10th of November 2020, which is the date related to the attack in 1987 by the Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel on the properties in Stepney and in particular in New Road, London E1. And the attacks are having impact to this day, 11th of November 2020. So the attack started when the Royal London Hospital criminals managing the property and the decisions affecting the property control decided to neglect their duties to the residents and tenants in the properties legally owned by the Royal London Hospital, and to put the particular properties up for auction that took place in October 1987. So that was the mass eviction of the tenants and occupants of the properties in Stepney that was mounted by the Royal London Hospital in 1987. 33 years on, the adverse impact and the damages that actually caused are continuing. And we are going to kind of have to separately deal with all the aspects of the damage and the harm and the detriment and the violations and the illegality and the criminality done by the Royal London Hospital in October 1987. The Royal London Hospital's criminality is not chronicled or reported or recognized in Fleet Street, but much smaller, much smaller damages caused by other parties to their relevant targets are being covered by Fleet Street titles, simply because the perception that dominates the Fleet Street editorial decisions and evidentially, justifiably condemnable as racist perception is that the targets of the Royal London Hospital or similar entities and organizations are not recognized as equal or as equal beings or equal parties if they are known to be either of the African background or Asian backgrounds, which is what is covered in the Guardian, the Daily Mail today about the ongoing inquiry into the police spies, that in effect, on the evidence in the long run, what is describable as committed sexual violence and rapes of the women they actually conned into having sex with them. That is being covered in the papers today by their featuring Stephen Lawrence's parents, Doreen Lawrence and Neville Lawrence. And the Guardian has quoted Doreen Lawrence and has actually also reported the words in paraphrase and in quotes attributed to Imran Khan, the kind of licensed law trader, in other words, solicitor, who became involved in the kind of case of the parents of the victim of racist murder. Stephen Lawrence was murdered in April 1993 in a place called Eltham in southeast London. And for 27 years, as Doreen Lawrence is reported today as saying, they have searched for answers and they have not got answers. And Imran Khan is actually quoted as saying, let's see what he's saying. So, Imran Khan, the licensed law trader, has been quoted as saying that, and he's speaking for Doreen Lawrence, who reportedly has been a very close friend of his, or he has been a very close friend of Doreen Lawrence for most of the past kind of 27 years. And Imran Khan is reported by The Guardian, Rob Evans is the byline, saying that most of the evidence that the London Metropolitan Police collected about Doreen Lawrence and the family after the murder of Stephen Lawrence, most of the files have not been given to the family. That's only one of a number of allegations and claims that the family has been making over the years about the role of the police, the behavior of the police, the attitude of the police. And what is absent from The Guardian today is, again, this is not the first time, this has been a persistent kind of failure by The Guardian to include any reference to the absence of any kind of rigorous, reliable, and fair forum or avenue to seek accountability for the behavior, conduct of the police, not just on issues like this one or these two, because the comments by Doreen and Neville Lawrence are being included in a package or packaged kind of coverage of the deadlock or the lack of confidence in the ongoing kind of so-called inquiry into the police spying on activists and campaigners. And so therefore, what is happening here in the case of Doreen Lawrence and Neville Lawrence is not something that is unique or exceptional in terms of the lack of accountability by the police or the lack of honesty by the police as they are claiming, yes? Now here is Imran Khan being kind of reported by the Daily Mail today, and it is saying, these are the words that it is saying. Mr. Khan, that is Imran Khan, said Baroness Lawrence, that is Doreen Lawrence, Stephen Lawrence's mother, was made a member of the House of Peers. So that is what is called Baroness Lawrence, was exhausted by all the lies. Let's see what the actual kind of paragraph says. So Mr. Khan said Baroness Lawrence was exhausted by all the lies and broken promises from Scotland Yard Now, Scotland Yard is another phrase for the Metropolitan Police, London Metropolitan Police, which had spun a web of deceit to cover up its failings and refused to disclose the material officers gathered on the family. That is the first kind of paragraph, and let's see what the next paragraph says within quotes. The racism which continues to be rife in our police and society was the racism which led to the murder of Stephen Lawrence and which resulted in his killers not being convicted for 18 years. The QC told the hearing. Now, it seems that Imran Khan has been made a, quote, Queen's Counsel. We shall discuss that and update accordingly about his kind of status as an elevated kind of Queen's Counsel. And the next quotation is, Baroness Lawrence is losing confidence, if she has not already lost it in this inquiry. Quotation ends. The next paragraph is, last week, a lawyer representing officers who served in Scotland Yard's secret special demonstration squad said the Lawrences were not directly targeted. Now, that is the inquiry that is ongoing. In this inquiry is referring to the inquiry about that police spies deceiving women with whom they had sex and under false pretense, and they lied their way into having sex with them. And the inquiry is, let's see what the inquiry is being called. So this is the version on the Guardian website, which is effectively very similar to the one on the printed version of the Guardian this morning. And the headline is, Doreen and Neville Lawrence castigate police spying inquiry. And parents of Stephen Lawrence losing confidence in ability of the process to get to the truth. And it's a piece by the Guardian's Rob Evans, and it is timed, this particular copy is timed at 17 minutes past 16, that is 4:17 GMT on Tuesday, the 10th of November 2020. So here it says, the parents of the murdered teenager Stephen Lawrence, notice the sentence doesn't say the parents of the teenager murdered by racists or the parents of the racist murdered teenager Stephen Lawrence. That they don't say racists in there. So the Guardian may be talking about Doreen and Neville Lawrence losing confidence in the inquiry, but the Guardian itself continues to be racist and following the racist policy of not admitting the presence of racism as the central factor. So the parents of the murdered teenager, murdered and racist murder is not the same thing. Stephen Lawrence have warned that they are losing confidence in the ability of a public inquiry to uncover the truth of how undercover police officers spied on them. Stephen's mother, Doreen Lawrence, said it was an utter disgrace that the Metropolitan Police had failed to fulfill its promise to release documents detailing the surveillance operation on her family. She said she was exhausted by a long line of hollow and downright hypocritical promises made by police and others in authority during her family's long quest for justice. She told Sir John Mitting, the judge leading the inquiry, that he had the choice of either being one of those in the long line of those that failed her or those very few that did not. She spoke of how she had mourned the loss of her son every day since he was killed by a racist gang in 1993. Her criticisms of the public inquiry were echoed by her ex-husband Neville, who said that the progress of the heavily delayed inquiry did not lead him to feel confidence in its approach or its outcome. He too called on Mitting not to fail him, as he had been failed so badly by the state over so many years. Lawyers for Stephen's parents gave opening statements on Tuesday at the public inquiry that is looking at how undercover officers spied on more than 1,000 political groups over more than 40 years. The inquiry was set up by there is a mistake in the sentence because the by should not be there. The word by should not be there. So what it says is that the inquiry was set up by 6 years ago by Theresa May, the then Home Secretary, after the Guardian revealed that a Scotland Yard undercover unit had spied on the Lawrences while they were trying to compel police to investigate properly their son's murder. Again, the Guardian's sentence leaves out the word racist murder. Theresa May commissioned the inquiry after discovering that the Metropolitan Police planted a spy in the Lawrence family camp who gathered personal details about the Doreen and Neville, as well as fascinating and valuable information about their campaign. At least 3 undercover officers spied on them. All right, so this is where so Imran Khan has been kind of promoted to a QC. Imran Khan, Doreen Lawrence's QC, told Mitting she is losing confidence, if she has not already lost it, in this inquiry's ability to get to the truth as to why she, her family, and supporters were spied upon by the police. This inquiry is not delivering on what she was promised and is not achieving what she expected. To say that Baroness Lawrence is disappointed is to understate her position. Khan said she considered, that is, Doreen Lawrence considered it an utter disgrace that Sir Bernard Hogan Howe, the then Metropolitan Police Commissioner, had failed to honor a promise made 6 years ago to release to her documents detailing the surveillance operation on her family. She is none the wiser as to why she and her family and supporters were spied upon. Imran Khan reminded Mitting that he too had promised to disclose information about the surveillance to her 3 years ago. So Baroness Lawrence is exhausted by the number of times that she has been given reassurances and promises. Each appears to have been as hollow as the next, and some appear downright hypocritical. Khan said only 2 of the 5 suspects have been jailed for Stephen's murder. Khan said for any parents to have to outlive their child is unimaginable. To lose their child in such circumstances is inconceivable. To still be fighting for justice 27 years on is unacceptable. And for those parents to be fighting for justice while being spied upon by the police, whose very role was to support and protect them, is simply unforgivable. That's Imran Khan speaking at the meetings inquiry into the police spies. Khan read a personal note from Lawrence on her life, on how her life changed after her son's murder. Again, they are leaving out the word racist. The racist murder. I now lead a completely different life, one that I never imagined I would have or wanted. For years, I have felt like an only soul in a sea of millions, she said. Whilst I understand why so many around me wanted to help me and support me, their presence only highlighted my own loneliness and sadness. Last week, the inquiry started to hear evidence in public for the first time. A key reason the inquiry has been delayed is that the police requested and were granted by meeting a large number of legal orders to keep secret their identities. Heather Williams, QC for Neville Lawrence, said the delay had substantially increased the distress he had suffered. He is deeply troubled by meetings, decisions to allow many of the undercover officers to remain hidden. Now, this piece on the Guardian online is effectively the same as the Guardian on print this morning. Although this was filed in the afternoon of Tuesday, the 10th of November 2020, it is actually the basis of the print version of the same copy or the same story. Now, this contains the basic kind of factors that the diagnosis of Fleet Street has been focusing on. And the first point that I have now made at least 3 times about the Guardian's kind of copy is that it leaves out the word racism, the concept of racism. Concept of racism, the fact of racism entirely from this copy. So the Guardian, which we have consistently, evidentially maintained is very racist, is proving to be a racist outlet. And the Guardian is considered not only by the peddling of the myth by the Guardian's kind of publishers and the Guardian operation as being the liberal daily newspaper or the kind of less racist newspaper, but it is as racist as the rest. Because this whole copy about Doreen and Neville Lawrence is about the murder 27 years ago of their son by racists, a gang of racists. And all the kind of excuses and the delays and the denials and the breaches of promises are to be found in the fact that racism dominates all the decisions, not only of the various named kind of persons and personalities and entities within the London Metropolitan Police, but also as represented in the ward authorities, not only the police, but other authorities as well. Now, going back to the Clerkenwell and Shoreditch County Court, and November 2011, when a racist woman called Judith Goodman sat as deputy district judge, allegedly to hear an appeal against the decision made in July 2011 by the racist district judge, one kind of step above the deputy district judge. But both Judith Goodman and Henrietta Manners, being racists and dedicated racists and abusers, racist abusers of their positions, agreed to continue the denial of basic justice and due say to the appellant. Appellant appealing the decision by Henrietta Manners in July 2011, and the appeal being supposedly heard in November by Judith Goodman. But both of them conspired. They conspired to fix the date of the hearing on the exact anniversary of the decision by Henrietta Manners in 1993, when the appellant, all those years ago, had been evicted from New Road, 10th of November, 1993. So when the appeal was being kind of filed, lots of informal communications took place among the members of the Clerkenwell and Shoreditch County Court, where the conspiracy was operated and the additional aggravation of racist taunting was added to be foisted on the appellant by fixing the date of the appeal exactly on the same day, the 10th of November 2011. And when she sat in what was clearly a deliberate, planned conspiracy to abuse her position as the judge sitting to hear the appeal, Judith Goodman made no secret of her contempt for due process, her confidence that if she lied and abused her position in order to scorn the appellant, she would not be held accountable. And any damage that she would be adding to the already severe losses suffered by the appellant would be kind of overlooked. So while they report about the parents of Stephen Lawrence seeking justice covers 27 years, this one at the Shoreditch, at the Clerkenwell and Shoreditch County Court on the 10th of November 2011. So the 11 years plus another 7 years. So this was concerning 18 years. Because 18 years earlier, on 10th of November 1993, the appellant had been evicted from New Road. And when they set the date of the hearing, so-called, of the appeal, both Judith Goodman and Henrietta Manners conspired to add this additional factor of aggravating insult. And what they were doing, they were showing what can be said to be two fingers. That is to say, they were being defiant and they were behaving like two very seriously sick and toxic and poisonous racist women in positions to inflict maximum denial of access to a fair hearing, to a target of their racist contempt. The appellant committed no crime in 93, nor in the 18 years that followed, nor were they planning to commit any crime. Just like Doreen Lawrence and Neville Lawrence have not committed any crime or done any wrong, but nevertheless have been treated with the maximum contempt and maximum denial of access to due information and due kind of justice and due process. What the Guardian piece actually quotes Imran Khan as saying, of course, was released by the Press Association. Rob Evans merely copies and paraphrases and puts various bits together for the Guardian, but essentially the copy has been circulated by the Press Association. And as I have said before, the Press Association, for the domestic kind of coverage of events, is the main source of general daily releases of information that gets repeated in the Fleet Street papers, and the other papers comes that are based in cities and towns outside of London in England. And anything that is not restricted to the domestic kind of themes mainly comes from Reuters or the AFP, or in the case of American issues and topics, Associated Press. So the fact that the Guardian has left out the word racist before saying killing or murder of Stephen Lawrence is not just confined to the Rob Evans and the Guardian's editorial line to exclude references to racism or racist motive and racist identity of the criminals who murdered Stephen Lawrence. It is also the fact that Press Association would not describe the murder of Stephen Lawrence as racist murder. So they are literally whitewashing the facts. So it is an illustration. Well, although Meeting is sitting not as a high court judge or as a tribunal kind of judge, he's sitting as an inquiry chair. But what he is doing, what the position is, what his kind of status is very much part of the kind of judicial process. He's doing the inquiry that had been set up by Theresa May while she was in post as the Home Secretary 6 years ago. But he's doing the kind of his inquiry, the procedures, so-called, he's supposed to be kind of following, are part of the judicial framework, let's say. And that is why there were two, quote, QCs representing separately two people who were Stephen Lawrence's parents. Although they're since separated or divorced, I don't know what the actual legal position is, but they're no longer together. But their account and their comments and their experiences are very much identical and comparable to each other's kind of accounts and experiences. And both of the parents are, of course, from Jamaica, and both of them are Black, African origin. And the fact that Imran Khan, who is from Pakistan or Pakistani background, has been able to put the words on behalf of Doreen Lawrence in the way that he has been reported as having put during Tuesday, shows that he himself, Imran Khan himself, has a must-have evidence, sufficient evidence to convince him to put those words to Meeting, the chair of the inquiry. And the fact that the inquiry has been kind of rendered futile by Meetings, allowing so many of the requests by so many of the accused, police, spies, whatever, to keep their identity secret, shows that although there is an inquiry, there is no inquiry into getting the truth. That should be enough summary on that one for the time being, except to say that the common factors, common to that and the common to the behavior of the other members of the judicial kind of bureaucracy, which is the expression that I apply, is consistent. That they're racist, they're prejudiced, and they're brazenly confident of not being held to account themselves for being too lenient to the accused in the wrongdoing or the parties that are accused of doing wrong, because they know that there exists no forum, no real democratic, ethical, transparent mechanism, lawful, legal, constitutional, to get to the truth when it comes to denying access to remedies through the court system to people who are court and the legal system, let's say, the people who are Black or African or Asian. So when the conspiracy by Henrietta Manners and Judith Goodman was updated, because there must have been a conspiracy before, because the day that Henrietta Manners issued the eviction order in favor of the Tower Hamlets community housing criminals and racists, that was in July 2011. She did so by ignoring literally hundreds of communications that had been sent to the Clerkenwell and Shoreditch County Court in the previous 2 years, including during the hours before Henrietta Manners sat there and made the racistly, corruptly, factually wrong and illegal order in favor of the Tower Hamlets community housing. The fact that it was illegal wasn't something she denied. But as I said before, she knew that even if she abused her position, and even if he broke the law, or even if she made an illegal order, as long as that order was being made against an Asian person, a Muslim person, an African person, she, Henrietta Manners, would not be found to have done anything wrong. So you extrapolate that kind of attitude and outlook and mentality and apply across the board to some of the notable, that is in terms of the evidence and the kind of heavy weight of the evidence that shows that the so-called judicial process or the inquiry process or the quasi-judicial process, all of these are dominated by racism, racist discrimination, and other kinds of prejudice. Other kinds of prejudice, including the white people that are treated like they are second-class white people, which is what the judicial bureaucracy treats Black people, African people, Asian people, and most certainly Muslim people to be, which is what happened with the now 30-year struggle, 30-plus year long struggle by the loved ones of the bereaved people campaigning for justice for the victims of the Hillsborough massacre of 1989 in Sheffield. Most of those victims were from Liverpool. And for 31 years, those families and relatives and survivors have been struggling and fighting and kind of crying and weeping for justice. And at no time has any agent or representative of the UK state, whether at central government level, Home Secretary level, or Prime Minister level, or whatever, at no time in the 31 years has any of them openly said that they were kind of not as respectful of the rights of the people of Liverpool, the victims of the Hillsborough massacre. But even if they haven't said that, by denying justice for 31 years, they have actually proven their complete contempt for those people. Because the lone police person who was kind of treated to a staged, bogus prosecution was spared any kind of penalties, or he was not convicted. So all kinds of hundreds of factors come in, and all these factors are created, confected, fabricated to maintain the unjust. And in the case of the victims of racist crimes and racist injustice, fabricated against the targeted victims, let's say the second tier victims, because the parents of Stephen Lawrence are second tier victims. Stephen Lawrence is the first tier victim. He was the one who was murdered by the racists, and the second tier victims have been treated to the same kind of contempt. When the murderers murdered Stephen Lawrence in the very short kind of span of time that it took them to commit the murder, in that short span of time, they must have thought billions of things denying the humanity and the rights of this victim. The difference between that and the last 27 years over which Stephen's parents have been going through the trauma of disbelief and frustration and anger and outrage and sadness and all the other feelings, those prejudices have been expanded and kind of in slow motion, they've been played at the expense of and to the horrors and to the pains of Doreen Lawrence and Neville Lawrence. So it's not like somebody saying that we don't want to give you justice. I mean, staging the meetings, inquiry into the abuse by the spies of these women is not saying that we don't recognize the victims, but it is saying that you play ball with us and we should show you how kind of solidly confirmed and confident we are in denying you justice, but while we keep treating you with a smile. And so when Tower Hamlets Council allowed Steve Hill and Mike Tyrrell and Colin Cormack and Keith Brown to take part in the years-long conspiracy to allow the gang of Bangladeshi criminals to surface on the corridors of Ashington House in order to add to the daily uncertainty of the tenant targeted by Mike Tyrrell for eviction. They did so in the knowledge of what was going on, in the knowledge of the impact these gangster criminals were having, and they were encouraging these criminals to add further criminal violations. When this was all happening, John Biggs was a councillor on Town Hrs Council, and he was given the information, and he refused or failed to take any action. The two councillors, Salimullah and Siraj Islam, two of them Bangladeshis, while the third one for the same ward at the time was the only one who was white, Ray Marnie. Ray Marnie was the only one who actually tried a few times to find out what was going on the corridors of Ashington House. And Ray Marnie actually engaged in some communications about the criminality and the gangsters' presence on the corridors of Ashington House. But the two Bangladeshis, Salimullah and Sirajul Islam, stayed silent, as did John Biggs, as did, for most of that time, the chief executive of the Hrs Council, who was being communicated to every single working day about the extent of the crimes and the criminals' presence and the disruption it was causing daily to the ordinary life of the target that had been targeted by the racist Mike Tyrrell for eviction. So what Stephen Lawrence's parents are reportedly saying today, and what the victims of the police kind of spies abusing the women for sex are saying, is that there is no due process and there is no justice and there is no remedy against the absence of due process and the lack of justice. And despite the fact that the Guardian and the Daily Mail are covering this, the Fleet Street role has been very much in support of the unjust kind of status quo and the racist status quo in the judicial bureaucracy. And we can say that the role of the son, Murdoch's son, was so bad that to this day the son is banned in most of Liverpool. People shun the son openly because the son accused the victims of having brought about the disaster on themselves. And the son, misedited at the time by Kelvin McKenzie, accused the victims of having been engaged in criminality and antisocial behavior and all the other things. So although the Daily Mail and the Guardian are reporting the feelings and the words of Neville Lawrence and Doreen Lawrence, essentially the role of Fleet Street has been very much supportive of the status quo of denial of justice, of lying, of racism. When it comes to the expression institutional racism, that was, as I have said before, confected, it was invented as a diversion during the actual first inquiry into the murder of Lawrence, racist murder of Stephen Lawrence. It was the chair of that inquiry, an ex-Judge called McPherson, who colluded with the conspiracy to shift the real blame from individual identifiable officers or staff or members of the police into a generic anonymity called institutional racism. That's where it was invented. It wasn't institutional racism, it was individual decisions. So if there was any number of decisions that denied a victim of racism justice, then it was individually made racist decision. So it's like the word Islamophobia. Now, phobia is fear. And so if you combine the two words or the two terms, Islam and fear, then it becomes fear of Islam, Islamophobia. Now, fear of Islam automatically, on the face of it, suggests that Islam has inherent characters or kind of characteristics that cause fear in others. So it is not the same as saying anti-Muslim or anti-Islamic. It's the opposite. It's saying that Islam is at fault. So Islamophobia is used by people, racists and anti-Muslims, posing as sympathetic to Muslims in the context of the racist anti-Muslim atmosphere in this country, in Britain. These people use the word Islamophobia when they are claiming in the same sentence, the same breath, that they are against those who attack Muslims. Now, they are themselves attacking Muslims when they are claiming to be against other attackers of Muslims, because they are saying that Islam essentially is something to be afraid of. And the basic meaning of the word Islam is peace. They're ignoring that quite brazenly. So we shall be continuing in the next editions.